Xenoblade has been my favorite video game series for over a decade. That is no secret of mine. I've spoken about it in so many ways to so many people throughout each and every one of these years. I've loved it for so long that sometimes I wonder, is there anything left for me to feel about it? I'm getting older, my priorities are changing, I don't play video games nearly as much anymore. It might sound stupid, but will I ever love the me right now more than I do right now? Well, something happened recently that once again showed me why this franchise is the gift that keeps giving. No, I am not talking about Xenoblade X, as much as I'm excited about that. I am referring to myself. I came out as bi-gender a whole year ago. Almost to the date, actually. To say it was a life changer would be an understatement, but little did I know this change in identity would open my eyes to appreciating Xenoblade in a way I never had before. And perhaps all along, it had been crucial in making this change possible to begin with. Xenoblade is an empowering series, most notably to me, Xenoblade 2. Yes, the same game that is occasionally lambasted for objectifying women. How could something so hypersexualized be empowering? While there's nothing wrong with disliking sexualized character designs, not everybody is as uptight about it, especially among queer youth. In fact, there are many who do feel empowered by being sexy and getting to play as a protagonist who is sexy and well written for once. With the endless supply of artists, cosplayers, streamers, and VTubers at your fingertips, you would have to insist on either ignorance or a holier-than-thou attitude to not be able to fathom that. At the end of the day, this is a personal matter. How you feel about it is up to you. But to empower someone doesn't start with appearances. It starts with acknowledgement. And I have always believed that Xenoblade 2 is a story of identity. By no means am I claiming it's about gender identity, or any kind for that matter. It's more of an all-encompassing theme. There are some people who interpret Nia as a trans allegory, while others get really defensive over the canon of the game. Meanwhile, I'm stuck in the middle not bothering with semantics, because just like any great form of art, it's not about its purpose. It's about how it makes you feel. And when there's several main characters at odds with their identity, then that's naturally going to resonate with a queer audience. Now, of course, I am not saying that every queer person who knows Xenoblade 2 loves it, nor am I a spokesperson for the entire LGBTQIA+ community. All I am doing is noting some observations I've made over the past 7 years in order to provide a perspective you may have not considered yet. As I alluded to before, Nia is practically the mascot of queer Xenoblade fans. Nia is a blade who was awoken into a royal family. When the daughter passed away, she was forced to replace her by becoming a flesh eater. Though she gained a longer lifespan and amazing powers, her mere existence as a flesh eater was taboo by itself, culminating in her persecution by the Indoline Praetorium. But the heaviest burden of all was the impulse to disguise herself, afraid of others having the slightest glimpse at the real her. Her fear was so paralyzing that she couldn't bring herself to use her own powers, even when they were the only hope to save Vandam. These emotions are further conveyed in Drifting Soul, the vocal theme that plays during this sequence. Overcome by guilt, Nia refused to make this mistake twice. The Emperor's near-death experience gave her an opportunity to be more accepting of herself while still being in control of her privacy. If she could be vulnerable to Mythra and now Niall, maybe she could to the rest of her friends. So by the time they were in need of her help again, she no longer felt desperate to keep repressing her true self. I think everybody can relate to Nia in some sort of way, but there's no doubt that trans people would especially see themselves in her. From her identity changing alongside her appearance, to the discrimination she suffered as a result, to Mythra finding out when she saw her naked body, and to finally the words of acceptance at her coming out party.
I am burdened no longer, not by my past, not by Jin. I am finally free. I'm no longer afraid. This is who I am, Rex. What's the point in living if I have to hide? Thank you for helping me see. I love you, Rex.
Allegory or not, I'm happy that there's a main protagonist in Xenoblade that trans people are able to confide in, and I hope that Mythra's reaction serves as an example to everyone. She doesn't make a big deal out of it at all. She simply meets Nia's courage with maturity and empathy. It doesn't need to be complicated. What is a big deal is this is the first time in the base game where Mythra demonstrates compassion. After all, the Aegis herself has her own identity crisis. When Mythra was first awoken by Adam, she felt detached to the world just by existing. Though she was confident in her powers, she couldn't help but ostracize herself for how different she was to other blades. Then, during her showdown with Malos, she lost control of the one thing she loved about herself and ended up causing destruction. She was traumatized by this. In her mind, she was nothing but a danger to others, and so she locked herself away. And when they opened up, they didn't find her. They found Pyra, a different self she created as a better version of herself. One that gets along with everyone and isn't nearly as harmful or offensive. This was the Aegis Mythra thought the world deserved, and the only reason she returned was because of a last-ditch effort. A lot of players get upset at Mythra's anger in the following scene. Like seriously, some people have not let it go. But after everything she went through, can you really blame her? Unlike Nia, Mythra's coming out wasn't on her own terms, so it must have been a pleasure for her to make sure Nia had the chance. Thankfully, both Pyra and Mythra were able to find closure, thereby achieving their true form, Numa. Numa is described not as a third personality, but rather as Pyra and Mythra simultaneously, a form where both identities are in control and acknowledged as equally valid. Though they lose this power in the finale, they are gifted with something better, the opportunity to exist alongside each other.
Numa. No, I should call you Pyra and Mythra.
What is it?
I want to apologize for having burdened you with all this.
Don't worry. We're actually grateful. Thanks to you, Father, we got to meet Rex. And everyone else. Those are cherished memories.
This is where I have to chime in. From start to finish, this is the storyline in Xenoblade that resonates with me the most. I have long desired to be a different version of myself, one that's more attractive and less of a burden to others. Heck, if it were up to me, I would have left the old version behind forever. But if I have to be honest with myself, the new me cannot replace my original self. I still have major flaws to work through, and as difficult as that has been to accept, I've found value in persevering with all of me. And ideally, that's what being bigender means to me. Two sides I've had to repress for different reasons, one of whom was born as a condemnation of the other. And yet they stand here equally valid both together and as individuals. I'm not trying to fish for praise or sympathy, by the way. I'm just trying to give a specific example of how these characters can inspire. It doesn't have to be that deep though. Morag is a less traumatic instance of identity. There's the Morag who wanted to be responsible and stay loyal to the Empire, and then there's the Morag who wanted to be adventurous for her own curiosity and personal growth. Sometimes she just couldn't help herself, like conveniently losing sight of Pyra's escape, but unlike a Disney princess, it took a long time for her to accept that she wanted to break free. In fact, it's her brother Niall who helped her come to terms with this. Niall didn't just tell Morag to venture out, he made it an official order. He realized that she struggled to express that side of her without validation from authority and family.
As befits the daughter of my Lord Uncle Andrig.
And I am grateful for it. If not for him, I would never have met Bridget. Never have met them. I'd have missed out on so much.
There. Those are your true feelings. Follow your heart, Morag Lidair.
I have no words. Thank you, Your Majesty. Very well then. I hereby accept the task you have assigned to me.
That's the Morag I know and love. Make me proud.
Self-validation is one thing. To receive it from a loved one, especially one you didn't expect, is a milestone. I'm sure you can relate to her if you're queer. I mean, come on. Morag is the very picture of gender. While all four of these women present unique conflicts of identity, what they share in common is their initial desire to be more normal and acceptable to others. That is their motivation to repress themselves. However, there is one more character worth discussing that doesn't quite fit that criteria. Malos. Malos is the opposite of repression. His issue is that he legitimately cannot contain himself. From the moment he was awoken by Amalthus, he was destined to chase calamity. He craved it, he needed it, despite his own doubts on whether or not that wish was truly his own. It wasn't just his identity, it was a full-on existential crisis with the sole glimmer of hope being an answer from God himself. And when that answer was simply, "You were born this way," Malos may not have been satisfied, but it did help him find closure in the end. Even when Rex regretted not being the one to awaken him, Malos didn't humor it. He had finally accepted that he was born that way.
If I had been your driver, all of this...
Kids say the damnedest things. There was only one driver for me. All... in all, it wasn't so bad.
It may be far from a happy ending, but I'd like to believe there is a silver lining here. From all walks of life, many people will find themselves wondering, why did I have to be like this? Why couldn't I have been normal? Why did I have to be born this way? These are tough, intrusive thoughts that often follow a queer awakening, but speaking only for myself here, it was better to accept it rather than obsess over it. It is way easier said than done, but by not obsessing over it, I could accept that I wasn't a problem, and I could still be who I want to be. I just wish Malos had more time to get there. Maybe someday he will. On a much lighter note, I did not expect Malos to arguably be the male queer icon of the franchise. There's a lot of fans who ship him and Jin, or at the very least, find their bromance to be special. Even his English voice actor had to admit it. He's gay too, by the way, but that's likely a coincidence. Those are the 4 characters in Xenoblade 2 who represent identity the most, and while none of them are officially confirmed to be queer, there are a few other Blades who are more explicitly queer adjacent. Shiba is as straightforward as it gets. She is a woman who knows exactly what she wants, and that is woman. I think she's underrated. Not only does she prefer women, she prefers kicking Napon. I get that she's an oddball, but she deserves more respect from the community. Florin is a bit more complicated. At first glance, he seems to be a boy who takes advantage of people thinking he's a girl. At worst, that's transphobic. At best, it's an antiquated joke. It turns out though that Florin isn't trying to deceive anyone. He just genuinely thinks he's cute and loves to be complimented. Girl, same. Rock is an interesting case. He's referred to with he, him pronouns, but he's treated as genderless in the Merc missions. There's even a running gag in the community about the game's code. 0 and 1 are gender values assigned to each blade, so obviously Rock is 4. But what started as a joke would turn into reality, as Xenoblade 3's Juniper was assigned the value of 2. We may never know the truth behind the number 4, but Nintendo made damn sure we knew what 2 meant. They pronouns are used both in-game and before the game was released in one of Nintendo's tweets. And to seal the deal, Juniper's English voice actor is non-binary themselves. This shouldn't be a surprise anyway. Ionios is a world without traditional gender roles. Its denizens probably don't mind if Juniper is male or female or somewhere in between. Now for all the wet blankets out there, no, this is not an English localization change. Juniper is not identified as male or female in the other languages as well. For instance, a variety of masculine, feminine, and neutral terms are all used in the French version. Simply put, there is no denying that Juniper is the first non-binary party member in Xenoblade, and certainly the first in any JRPG I've played. That itself is incredible. But dang, we were so close to already having another with A. Due to her ambiguous nature, A was highly speculated to be NB to the point it was generally accepted. That all came to a screeching halt when A was confirmed to be a woman via the dreaded value of 1 and the notorious lore-dropping art book. It does make sense as A and Alpha are supposed to be opposites, but it is a shame considering how popular she and Alvis are. On the bright side, that doesn't change the fact that their core crystal represents both masculinity and femininity, and to me, that's a win. Speaking of debatable queer representation, can we talk about that picture though? It's a similar situation to Nia, where there's some fans who interpret it as a poly relationship, and then there are many others who are vehemently against any idea other than it being a harem. The latter being mostly those who really wanted to be upset when they saw it. I've already made a video about why I lean towards the former. It's way too much to cover right now, so all I'll say is, they did foreshadow this in Xenoblade 2. It's not like this came out of nowhere. Regardless, I bring this up because for all my fellow queer youths out there, it seems like the world has not caught on to how genuinely popular ethical, non-monogamous relationships are for us. I'm not saying it's the majority, But I was shocked when I discovered how common it was on dating apps. It's actually more difficult if you aren't into it. So yeah, this picture, not as much of a stretch as you might think. Lastly, there's one more party member who deserves their flowers. Someone who isn't necessarily queer-coded, yet tackles the theme of identity and is frequently misunderstood. Sena. Sena is overlooked for not having as much backstory and, quite frankly, trauma as her friends, but that's part of what makes her such a grounded character. She is sincerely a wonderful portrayal of someone who isn't comfortable being themselves and merely tries to fit in instead, which in turn fostered an unhealthy impulse to measure her self-worth by how useful she is. While she isn't that complex in a bubble, what makes her compelling is her interactions with other people. She may have been awkward, but she demonstrated the highest emotional intelligence out of the group, if only because of her longing to be reciprocated. This is why she was able to see Shania's betrayal coming. She knew exactly what it looked like to be deprived of approval and try to fake her way to it. But it wasn't just Shania. By empathizing with Mio, Lance, Uni, and several others, all she came to find out is that their actual common grounds is struggling to come to terms with who they are. And once you realize that nobody truly has anything figured out, then fuck it. May as well be you. I really hope you're able to express yourself, even if you feel ostracized, like you don't fit in, or nobody understands you. And the tough pill to swallow is sometimes our only choice is to be someone we're not. It may be hard, but if Sena's anything to go by, if you try really hard to find opportunities to be yourself, that validation may be waiting for you, even when it feels like you failed.
Sometimes, you can be really hard on yourself. Come now. I know you've touched so many lives. I think we've all seen that. Yeah. Yeah. It's all right. Don't give up. Because time is still on our side.
That is how Xenoblade empowers identity. Or at least a small part in how it does. With narratives this intricate and well written, everybody is going to have a character that speaks to them. For me, it was Xenoblade 2 that I confided in the most, but any of these games has the power to inspire. It's been this way since day one.
Woo! You can't have a rainbow without Ryan, baby. Oh yeah!
In all seriousness, this franchise has always been about empowering the future, and in such a tumultuous era, queer or not, but especially if you're queer, the near future seems frightening. But that's why a story like Xenoblade is more important than ever to experience, to empower yourself to be in control of your own future, to face it as your own genuine self, and to have the courage to keep walking forward. So will I ever love the me right now more than I do right now? Probably not for a while, but I have a feeling that he or she will be thanking me later.
Will you give up and stay where you belong? Afraid your time, it just might take too long. And you won't know unless we keep on trying. Now we need the strength to carry on.
I don't typically do shout-outs, but tell you what, for this I will. To get a Noah says trans rights! You're damn right.